British police investigate a van attack on worshippers near a London mosque as terrorism. The successes and setbacks women in Africa face on the difficult road to empowerment. And a South African trailblazer passes on his passion for horses to a new generation. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Now, suicide bombers have struck Nigeria, killing 12 people and wounding 11. Borno State Police say the attacks on Sunday were carried out by 5 female bombers. A state police spokesperson says the attacks happened around 8:30 p.m. local time in the village of Kofa, located 8 kilometers from the state capital, Maiduguri. According to police, the first suicide bomber detonated near a mosque, killing 7. And the second triggered has devised in a house, killing 5 people. Police say the other 3 bombers also died. There has been no immediate claim of responsibility for the attacks. But Northeast Borno State is the birthplace of Boko Haram terrorist group, and the use of female suicide bombers in public places is a tactic used by the militants. On June the 7th, Boko Haram killed 14 people in bombings and shootings in Maiduguri. Well, our police in London are treating Monday's early morning incident where a van plowed into worshippers near a mosque as a terrorist act. 10 people were injured. Shortly after midnight, the vehicle swerved into a group of people leaving prayers at the Muslim Welfare House and the nearby Finsbury Park Mosque in North London, one of the biggest in Britain. Authorities say officers arrested the 48-year-old driver who had been detained by members of the public at the scene of the act. Deputy Assistant Commissioner Neil Bosu, the senior national coordinator for counter-terrorism, says it appeared the man was the sole attacker. Bosu thanked those who detained the suspect for their restraint, calling it commendable.
And what it proves to me is that Londoners will act together to protect themselves, but they will do so in a way that doesn't feed into terrorist and extremist hands.
British Prime Minister Theresa May condemned the attack in a speech in front of her official residence and vowed that hatred and evil of this kind will never succeed.
This was an attack on Muslims near their place of worship. And like all terrorism, in whatever form, it shares the same fundamental goal. It seeks to drive us apart and to break the precious bonds of solidarity and citizenship that we share in this country.
Well, Commissioner Bosu said all of the injured were from the Muslim community. He also clarified earlier reports that a man pronounced dead at the scene was related to the attack since he was already receiving medical aid. Britain, especially London, has been on edge over several recent incidents, including last month's terror bombing in Manchester and the recent vehicle attack and stabbings near London Bridge. Well, for more insight on the challenges of fighting terrorism, I'm joined by Alberto Fernandez, a counterterrorism expert and former coordinator for strategic counterterrorism at the U.S. State Department. He has also been U.S. ambassador to Equatorial Guinea and chief of mission in Sudan. Ambassador Fernandez, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you.
Now, we mentioned the challenges of fighting the new methods being employed. We have seen such a shift. Now, what do you make of this? Use of vehicles, use of knives on the streets?
Well, it's a way for jihadist groups to make it easier to commit violence. The old pattern of a plot involving explosives and involving large groups of people is more complicated. The simpler you can make it, the easier it becomes for people to carry things out.
So now, how do authorities go about combating these new methods? Because who can stop a person from driving around? Who can stop a person from, having a knife?
Well, of course, it varies from place to place. What strategies you would use in Nigeria are going to be different than strategies you would use in the UK or the United States. But first of all, of course, the first line of defense is always law enforcement, national security, the power of the state to punish, the power of the state to investigate and do that. But beyond that, you have the ideology. And there you have to do two things. You have to do the negative and the positive. You have to find ways to weaken their ideology, to discredit it, to subvert it, to subvert the building blocks of it. And then you have to have something which draws people together. a narrative which is about community, a narrative which is about solidarity and unity and bringing diverse people and diverse communities together.
So what you're saying here is not about fighting it. It's not about using weapons or using some kind of war strategy. It's about ideology and kind of psychology here.
Well, it's both. You have to fight, you have to kill the adversary, you have to prevent terrorist attacks from happening. But of course, you can't kill your way out of this problem because it's also an ideological problem. So it means you have to fight the ideological battle, the media battle, as well as the one of law enforcement and national security.
You know, this is sometimes very sensitive when you talk about Muslims largely being involved in terrorism, and we know most of those who have been killed by terrorists are actually Muslims in Muslim countries.
Yes.
But at the same time, how do you explain that a great number of those who participate happen to be, professing Islam?
Well, you have a historical reality, which is a revolutionary ideological movement, which is Salafi jihadism, which grows out of Islam, takes elements from Islam and politicizes it, weaponizes it, principally, as you said, against other Muslims and non-Muslims. So I think the mistake people have is people have these exaggerations, right? These extremes. This is either all about Islam or this is nothing about Islam. What it actually is, it's about a political movement which uses something very powerful, which is religion as a clothing, as rocket fuel to jet power that ideology that they have.
Is there anything that parents, say parents of young people who are likely to be lured into this, kind of ideology, is there anything they could do?
Well, I think there's a lot they could do. First of all, I think that the ideology preys on a superficial and an ignorant understanding of religion and a superficial and ignorant understanding of the world that you live in. So having your kids being educated about their own religion, having kids being educated on the own country that they're in, is really important. The extremists prey on stupidity. They prey on alienation and questions of identity. So you have to ask yourself, what does it mean to be a young Muslim growing up in the West? To whom are they loyal to? To whom do they identify with? And so it's a question of kind of countering the ability of the adversary they have to seize upon alienated, dumb, angry young people.
Yeah. Now, how about the case like what we saw in London? This is a non-Muslim,
yes.
In fact, attacked mostly Muslims.
Yes.
And also think about the US, we've had attacks that have not been perpetrated by Muslims.
Yes.
What is that? Isn't it terrorism?
Well, it's a similar thing. The Islamist jihadist ideology, which I'm talking about, is a product of modernism. So you have pathologies of the far right and the far left, which are exactly the same. What happened in London today, this attacker that attacked people coming out of a mosque? This was generated by bigotry. It was generated by hatred of the other, different than me, and a sense of punishing individuals for the perceived crimes of everybody, right? Because of Manchester or London, I'm going to hurt people coming out of a mosque because they are responsible. This is exactly the worldview that the jihadists use for 9/11, for 7/7, or for whatever. So it's always about bigotry, about my view of the other, and about blaming a community for a perceived action committed by supposedly someone part of that community.
In about 10 seconds, do you see as defeating this in the very near future?
I think it's going to be hard. I think the key is to continue to work steadily, not going to extremes, not losing focus.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Fernandez, we do appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Ambassador Fernandez is a former coordinator for strategic counterterrorism at the U.S. State Department. And in July, he'll become the new president of the Middle East Broadcasting Networks, which is a sister network of the Voice of America. Well, our UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and other high-level international guests and donors will be in Uganda later this week for the Refugee Solidarity Conference in Kampala. The conflict in South Sudan continues to send civilians flooding into Uganda. The Ugandan government is hoping to raise $8 billion to support the refugees for at least 4 years. We get more from Halima Athumani.
Uganda hosts refugees from at least 5 African countries. Nearly 1 million have come from South Sudan, most of them in the past year, and they keep coming. The steady influx of refugees is creating serious strain in Uganda. The UN World Food Programme was forced to cut the food rations in May. Aid agencies have also been giving cash aid.
Sometimes we miss the cooking oil. We get only food and the beans. There is no cooking oil. Sometimes they give us the flour of the porridge.
The local food supply is stretched to the limit.
We have been forced to reduce the distribution for the month of May 50%, but that is mainly due to the physical availability of food and the arrival of food in country. We have taken every measure to make sure that in the June and July and August we have a stable pipeline.
Uganda's health system is struggling as well. The number of patients in need of care in northern Uganda has tripled. The UNFPA says it has already earmarked $1 million for this year.
That is, of course, not enough. We need at least triple or 4 times as much. And I'm talking only about reproductive health, maternal health, and gender-based violence services.
Uganda is known for its open and progressive approach to refugees. There are no camps, there are settlements. Refugees can move around freely and they can work in Uganda. But the massive influx from South Sudan is taking a toll on host communities.
A district that was supposed to host 300,000 people is now hosting 600, 700,000 people. That district, they are competing for trees that are used as fuel for energy. They are competing for drugs that are supposed to be used by the host communities in the health centers. They are competing for roads that were supposed to sustain the 300 people. Now the heavy trucks taking emergency relief for refugees are also plying the same routes. So there are so many things that are under pressure. So we want the international community to support us, lift the pressure.
Back at the border, refugees continue to arrive. The government says Uganda will not shut its doors to people in need, but the country cannot bear this burden alone. Halima Athumani for VOA News, Adjumani, Uganda.
Well, the Russia probe consuming Washington continues this week amid new reports President Donald Trump is being investigated not for collusion with Moscow, but on a potential obstruction of justice charge. VOA's Michael Bowman reports that the president's legal team insists the news media are wrong, but Trump's own Twitter activity is adding to the intrigue.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth?
Earlier this month, former FBI Director James Comey testified that, at least until he was fired in May, President Trump was not a target of the probe into Russian election meddling.
There is not a counterintelligence investigation of Mr. Trump.
To this day, no evidence has been made public tying Trump personally to Russian cyber espionage. But special counsel Robert Mueller reportedly has expanded the Justice Department's investigation to examine possible obstruction of justice. Comey testified that the president asked him to end one facet of the probe before abruptly dismissing him.
He was asking for something and I was refusing to give it. I take the president at his word that I was fired because of the Russia investigation.
Trump's legal team continues to deny any suggestion the president is under investigation, pointing to Comey's testimony nearly 2 weeks ago.
The president was not under investigation as part of any probe into Russian interference.
But in a recent tweet, Trump himself wrote, quote, "I am being investigated for firing the FBI director." In addition, he repeatedly blasted Mueller's probe as a witch hunt.
The president wants to take down Bob Mueller. His lawyer wants to take down Bob Mueller. And the question is why? And I think the answer is they want to lay the foundation to discredit whatever Bob Mueller comes up with. They're essentially engaging in a scorched earth litigation strategy that is beginning with trying to discredit the prosecutor.
The president's defenders say Trump has every reason to be exasperated.
Trump sits there and says, let me get this straight. I know I didn't do anything with the Russians. Comey has said 3 times I didn't do anything with the Russians. Nobody on Capitol Hill has any proof I did anything with the Russians. And now I get an independent counsel who's going to mess up at least the next year at a minimum.
Only Mueller knows for sure where he intends to take the Russia investigation. And he will not speak publicly until the probe is concluded, months or even a year or more from now. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends also. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Now, coming up, the future of women's leadership in Africa. Stay with us.
My name's Carla Babb, and I work the Pentagon beat. That access helps me to do better stories. Every day it's my responsibility to collect all of the defense news. It keeps our VOA viewers informed. I get to travel all across the globe. Anything that's defense related and how to protect and keep people safe, that's where I'll go. So it's never a dull moment at the Pentagon. My name is Carla Babb. This is my beat.
Well, the African Union has declared 2010 to 2020 the African Women's Decade. Now, the United Nations recently launched the African Women's Leadership Network to support women's leadership across the continent. It will provide training and mentoring for women trying to reach leadership posts traditionally held by men. But as Africa 54, Africa is winning the battle for gender equality and women's leadership, well, Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick has more.
When it comes to trailblazing, African women are in a league of their own. They are pioneers, freedom fighters, artists, and winners of Nobel Prizes, Oscars, and gold medals, leaders in the world of business, academia, and politics. They're also farmers, homemakers, teachers, and nurturers, long the backbone of Africa's economies. But statistics reveal African women are also marginalized, oppressed, displaced, and disadvantaged, bearing the brunt of war, violence, and poverty. The world's top 5 countries with the most women in their workforce are all in sub-Saharan Africa. Yet women get paid the least, and in many cases, they don't get paid at all. Inequality begins early. Of the more than 16 million girls out of school in sub-Saharan Africa, more than half will never set foot in a classroom. If you're poor and a girl, chances are you'll have to drop out of school, get married early, and spend your time cooking, cleaning, and caring for family members. You'll likely be more vulnerable to maternal mortality and disease. Gender-based violence is widespread. In South Africa, 1 in every 4 women has experienced physical violence. Female genital mutilation is still practiced in 27 African countries. African women and girls are regularly sold into slavery at home and abroad. Other statistics, though, show that Africa's women politicians have been overcoming these odds. 2012 was arguably the most historic year for women, shattering the political glass ceiling. South Africa's Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma became the first woman to lead the African Union. The Gambia's Fatou Bensouda was appointed chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. Joyce Banda became Malawi's first woman president, joining Liberia's Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who made history 7 years before as Africa's first female head of state. Women's representation in politics has made substantial progress throughout sub-Saharan Africa, where the percentage of female parliamentarians increased to 22% last year, outstripping developed countries like the United States and Japan. Rwanda leads the world's rankings in women's representation. 61% of its parliament is female. Women make up more than 40% of South Africa's parliament. Much of the success has been thanks to progressive laws that require political parties to nominate female candidates. Countries like Uganda, Kenya, Burundi, Senegal and Angola have all adopted electoral gender quotas, paving the way for women who dare shake up the status quo. Some successes, some shortcomings. Perhaps the greatest challenge for women's empowerment in Africa is to ensure that everyday women and girls are afforded the same opportunities as elites. Hayley Adams Fitzpatrick, VOA News, Washington.
Talking about women, the 31st International Confederation of Midwives Congress is underway in Canada. It is the flagship event for midwives worldwide, and it brings together and celebrates a total of 131 midwives associations representing 113 countries. Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu is covering the event, and she joins us live via Skype from Toronto. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Vincent.
Now, tell us what's going on at this conference and what are some of the main key speakers?
Quite a bit is going on here. About 4,000 people are attending the conference, as you mentioned, here in Toronto. Many of them are midwives coming from different parts of the world, from different countries. Quite a few of them from sub-Saharan Africa, Uganda, Kenya, you name it, they're here. And the idea here is to gather these women and men to speak about the profession of midwifery. Today, some people see it as obsolete, but the midwives want the global community to know that their profession is very much relevant. They are very important in some settings where they are the only health providers when it comes to addressing maternal health and newborn health. So they are here to share experiences, learn from one another, and really be inspired to continue their work.
Now, we know that giving birth is associated with so many risks, and we are always grateful to our mothers and sisters. What are some of the issues that have been brought out, especially facing midwives, particularly in African countries?
They do share common issues, many of them, whether it's in sub-Saharan Africa or in other parts of the world, even in Canada here. The midwives talk about the fact that they need more education. Higher education needs to be included in this profession because there is a sense that midwifery are not well educated. They also need more training long term to develop their skills, because when you think about it, midwives are multi-skilled healthcare providers. They are the one that pregnant women will meet before giving birth, during birth, and after birth. Midwives also provide care to the babies, and they really want to have the training, the necessary training. Then they talk about also getting the respect that they deserve and also having the attention they deserve. They are calling for more investment in midwifery so that they can get the resources they need. In some settings, midwives don't even have the basic tools such as alcohol to help the mothers during childbirth. Also, prenatal care is very important. Some of the leaders you ask that are attending, His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete, who is the former president of Tanzania. We also have Her Excellency Toyin Saraki, who is a Nigerian, very instrumental in providing maternal health in Nigeria. We also have the Minister of Health of Canada, Jane Philpott, and many others that are here to support midwives.
We hope everybody listens to them and gives them some help. A very important conference. Thanks a lot, Lino.
Thank you, Vincent.
Now that is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu reporting live via Skype from Toronto in Canada. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. A South African writing champion passes on valuable life lessons to Soweto youth. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Mali, security forces have rescued 37 guests from a Mali resort under attack by gunmen. In Tanzania, tech consultant Jones Murusha has invented a cashless challenge to promote digital payments. In Egypt, a Cairo criminal court recommends the death penalty for 30 people convicted of involvement in the 2015 assassination of Egypt's top prosecutor. In Sudan, 4 boys and 4 girls, just 10 months to 9 years old, are removed from their parents for being Sudanese Islamic State members that operate in Libya. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here is what is trending. In 1976, Soweto was the scene of a violent rebellion against the apartheid government. More than 4 decades later, the mood in the Soweto horse paddock couldn't be more different. 73-year-old teacher Enos Mafokate was the first black man to compete at the Royal International Horse Show in London in 1980. He now dedicates his life to teaching children to ride and care for horses at his Soweto Equestrian Center. He started giving riding lessons in the 1990s. In 2006, Mafokate turned 26 acres of donated land into a training center. He is now as famous for his work with children as he was for his professional short jumping career. Well, next up, a designer in Israel is attempting to bridge the gap between our country's 2 main languages by creating a hybrid of the two. Liron Levi Tokenish hopes to help Jews and Arabs understand each other better. Arabrit is a new experimental writing system which is combining Hebrew and Arabic in the same letter forms. She uses up to 638 varieties and letters, and each word takes about 15 hours to create on a computer. Takanish's design may achieve immortality in an expected way. She is getting numerous requests to design Arabrit words for tattoos. Well, and finally, disco dancing, bears, raving, repeats, and virtual reality horror. The annual Electronic Entertainment Expo has played host to a wild and wacky mix of games to suit almost everyone's tastes. Video game publisher Ubisoft is showcasing its new Nintendo Switch game that fuses Mario, Luigi, and other popular characters with its raving rabbids. On the other side of the scale, British video game developer Supermassive Games is showcasing the impatient virtual reality horror game that transports gamer into the body of a patient with amnesia. And that is what is trending today. And that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune into VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings, Today Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. A target is something you want to hit, like when you shoot a bow and arrow.
Moving target.
Are Jonathan and Anna having target practice?
Last month, the boss said the first person to get 100 new customers would get a $1,000 bonus.
And now he tells us we need to get 200 before getting the bonus money.